In the commercial cleaning business, you learn to see what everyone else ignores. You see the dust gathering under the mahogany desks of CEOs, the mold in the corners of five-star hotels, and the quiet decay of buildings that look perfect from the outside. My name is Wade Reeves. I started 16 years ago with a rusted white van and a single industrial vacuum. Today, Reeves Commercial Services handles 43 contracts across the Carolinas. I don't wear a suit to work, I wear a reinforced work shirt with my name stitched over the pocket. People like Grant Hollister see a man like me and think manual labor. They think simple. They think expendable. I came home on a random Wednesday in March. A crew chief had called out, so I'd finished a high-rise contract myself. I was tired, covered in the faint scent of industrial floor wax, and looking forward to a quiet dinner with my wife, Carla. But when I pulled into the driveway, there was a silver Audi parked at the curb. Dealer plates. Polished to a mirror shine, the front door was unlocked. I walked in and heard a man's voice, low, relaxed, laughing, coming from the living room. I turned the corner and stopped. There was a man sitting in my wingback leather chair. He had his feet up on my ottoman, a glass of my 18-year-old scotch in his hand. He looked like he'd been plucked out of a Success magazine, expensive haircut, a crisp white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, and shoes that cost more than my first truck. Carla was on the sofa, her legs tucked under her, looking at him with an expression I hadn't seen on her face in 5 years. It was the look of someone who had found something shiny and new. She didn't jump. She didn't look guilty. She just looked at me like I was a delivery driver who had interrupted a private party. "Wade," she said, her voice cool. "You're home early." The man in my chair didn't stand up. He didn't even shift his feet. He just took a slow sip of my scotch and smirked at me. It was a look of pure, concentrated arrogance. "So this is the husband," he said, his voice smooth and dripping with Ivy League entitlement. "I'm Grant. I'd offer you a seat, but I think I've found the best one in the house." I didn't scream. I didn't swing. In my line of work, if you find a biohazard, you don't touch it with your bare hands. You contain it. I looked at Carla, then back at Grant. I saw the silver Audi through the window. I saw the way his jacket was draped over the back of my chair. "Get out," I said quietly. Grant raised an eyebrow, his smirk widening. "Look, Wade, I think we should be adults here. Carla's told me about the disconnect. We're just having a conversation." "You're in my house," I said, stepping closer. "In my chair. Drinking my liquor. You have exactly 30 seconds to walk out that door before I decide to treat you like the trespasser you are." He rose slowly, towering over me for a second, trying to use his height as a weapon. He leaned in, whispering so Carla couldn't hear. "I've seen your tax returns, Wade. Carla showed me everything. You're a janitor with a fancy title. I'm the director of operations for a regional hotel group. You aren't in my league." He gathered his things, kissed Carla on the cheek right in front of me, and walked out. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd marked his territory, but Grant Hollister had made the mistake of his life. He'd walked into a predator's den thinking it was a sheepfold. He didn't know that my brother, Dennis, had retired from the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Department after 22 years as a fraud investigator. He didn't know that I knew every service entrance and back office of every hotel in his group, and most importantly, he didn't know that I had already noticed the anomalies in our joint account 3 months ago. That night, after Carla locked herself in the guest room, I sat at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee and a legal pad. I didn't feel grief. I felt a cold, structural clarity. I called Dennis. "I need a full workup on a Grant Hollister," I said. "Check his corporate filings, his expense reports, and his right-hand man, Curtis Payne. I have a feeling Grant's been using company funds to pay for the division he's been selling my wife." "Give me 48 hours, Dennis replied. Over the next 2 days, I went to work like nothing was wrong. But I wasn't just cleaning floors. I was talking to the night porters, the desk clerks, and the auditors I'd known for a decade. I discovered that Grant wasn't just a high flyer. He was a ghost. He was booking luxury suites for client meetings that never took place. He was coding expensive dinners in Raleigh and Asheville as regional development. By Friday, Dennis met me with a folder that would have made a prosecutor salivate. Grant hadn't just been cheating on his wife, Cheryl, he'd been embezzling from his hotel group to fund his double life. And the kicker? He was using a subordinate, Curtis Payne, to launder the expense reports that I looked at the photos Dennis had taken, Grant and Carla at a mountain resort, the invoice paid by the hotel group's corporate card. He thinks I'm a simple man, I whispered to the empty office. He thinks I'm just the guy who takes out the trash. I picked up the phone and called a reporter I knew at the Regional Business Journal. A woman who loved stories about corporate vultures. I have a story for you, I said. It's about a director of operations who's been treating his company's ledger like a personal piggy bank. And I have the receipts to prove it. The audit was about to begin. And unlike the floors I wax, Grant Hollister wasn't going to be able to see his reflection in the outcome. The reporter at the Regional Business Journal, Bridget Harper, didn't need much convincing. When she saw the cross-referenced expense reports and the hotel logs, her eyes lit up like a forensic accountant on a trail. She spent the weekend verifying my sources, the night clerks and the digital breadcrumbs Grant had left behind in his arrogance. By Monday morning, the fuse was lit that I was sitting at the kitchen table, finishing a cup of black coffee, when Carla came downstairs. She was dressed for a power lunch, looking vibrant and untouchable. She didn't look at me. She just grabbed her car keys and headed for the door. "You're making a mistake, Wade," she said, her hand on the knob. "Grant is moving to the corporate board by summer. He's offering me a partnership in a new design firm. You can keep the cleaning company and your small-town pride. I'm moving up. I hope the view is worth the fall, Carla," I said, not looking up from my laptop. She laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound, and walked out. 2 hours later, Bridget's article hit the wire. Internal fraud probe, regional hotel director accused of embezzling corporate funds for personal luxury. I didn't have to wait long. My brother, Dennis, was listening to a police scanner and monitoring his contacts at the hotel group's headquarters. By noon, the board had called an emergency meeting. By 2 p.m., Grant Hollister was escorted out of his office by 2 security guards, his director of operations plaque likely already in the trash, but the real cleaning was just beginning. That I was back in my office at Reeves Commercial Services when the front door swung open. It wasn't Carla. It was Grant. He looked like he'd been through a thresher. His tie was loosened, his face was flushed a sickly purple, and the alpha smirk was completely gone. "You did this," he screamed, slamming his hands onto my desk. "You leaked those internal memos. You went to the press. That's confidential company data, you piece of." I stood up slowly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "I'm a contractor for your hotels, Grant. Part of my contract involves reporting sanitation issues and structural risks. You were both. I'll sue you into the dirt," he barked, but his voice cracked. "With what money?" I asked, leaning in. "Your corporate accounts are frozen. Your wife, Cheryl, just filed for an emergency injunction on your joint assets after she read the article about your weekend in Asheville with my wife. And your right-hand man, Curtis Payne. He's currently at the precinct, singing like a bird to stay out of a fraud indictment." Grant's knees actually buckled. He sank into one of my cheap plastic visitor chairs, the kind he probably mocked in his head 1,000 times. He looked at me, and for the first time, he actually saw me. Not the janitor. The man who owned the building. "I have nothing," he whispered. "No," I corrected him. "You have exactly what you built. A stack of lies and a zero balance." He walked out of my office like a ghost. He didn't even go to his silver Audi, it was being towed for a repossession order I'd helped facilitate through a friend at the dealership. That evening, I went home. The house was quiet. Carla was sitting on the floor in the living room, her expensive designer bags packed and sitting by the door. She was crying, but they weren't the tears of someone who was sorry. They were the tears of someone who had bet on the wrong horse and lost the house. He's gone, Wade, she sobbed. Grant, he's being charged with felony embezzlement. He told me to go away. He said this was all my fault because I showed him our finances. He was always going to blame you, Carla, I said, walking past her to the kitchen. Men like that don't take responsibility. They just find a new host. Can we talk about this? She asked, standing up. We have 16 years. You said you built this life for us. I turned around and looked at her. I thought about the way she'd looked at Grant in my chair. I thought about the $9,000 she'd drained from our joint account to buy him gifts while I was scrubbing floors at 3 a.m. I built a foundation, Carla. You're the one who decided to invite an infestation into it. I pulled a document from my pocket. This is the deed to the house. It's in my name only, signed over by my father before we ever met. And these are the divorce papers. My attorney is Paul Garrett. He's already filed for a full asset split based on marital waste. Wade, please, the house is being professionally cleaned tomorrow morning, I said, my voice as steady as a level line. I want every trace of that man, and you, gone by 8 a.m. I've already arranged a month at a mid-tier extended stay for you. It's one of the hotels I don't clean. You'll find the service lacking. I walked upstairs, leaving her in the living room with her designer bags and her empty future. 6 months later, I was back in that same leather wingback chair. The house was quiet, the scent of fresh lemon and cedar in the air. Reeves Commercial Services had just signed the biggest contract in our history, taking over the entire regional hotel group's maintenance. I took a sip of my scotch and looked at the empty space where the silver Audi used to sit. The books were balanced. The trash was gone. And for the first time in 16 years, the foundation was perfectly, undeniably clean.